Jesse, cue it up. Everybody in their places. It's time to go.
Are we rolling? Yeah, we're rolling. Okay, let's get it done, everybody. Let's go.
Hey, Reagan, how's my hair? Is it okay?
Poxy, they can't see you.
All right, come on, let's go. Let's do this, people. Poxy, start on page 4. Get the lines right this time.
All right, I got it this time, I swear.
4, 3.
Come on. It's time for the Ghost of Hollywood.
All right, wall crawlers, I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and you are tuned in to the 32nd episode of The Ghost of Hollywood.
That's right, and tonight is a first here for us as we venture into the world of editing. And who better to talk to about that than Tom Costantino, who is well known in the industry for his versatility and ability to wear multiple hats in the post-production world.
Yeah, and I will say this, all of the work that he's put into, everything he's done has really made him, it's paid off. He's had a pretty successful career, and he's no stranger to challenges. I mean, look at a show like Ted, right? It's hilarious, but I know that the amount of time and effort that goes into putting that bear on screen is brutal, More on that later.
And trust me, much more on that later. Then, of course, Tom has worked on a variety of other shows such as True Life and The Orville. And if you've seen The Orville, then you'll know well that the editing team pulled time getting this done.
You made it sound like this is some kind of prison sentence.
Well, you're describing it like it is one.
Right, my bad. I overstated. Continue.
As I was saying, incorporating visual effects into a high-level production on a sci-fi series can be taxing for all involved, even though the payoff has a potential and is at times sweet.
Now, be warned, wall crawlers. Tonight may be the most technical we have ever gotten so far here on The Ghost of Hollywood.
I don't know. I feel like that maybe isn't a good thing.
Oh, of course it's a good thing, Reagan. I mean, I only have a haphazard maverick's wit of understanding editing programs like Avid Media Composer, but it's enough to make the naive questions sound pretentious while not drowning anyone in the details of tech.
Elaborate on the details of tech.
Oh, it sounds good, doesn't it?
Yeah, sure, it sounds good.
Well, what I mean, Reagan, is I will probably embarrass myself, asking questions that'll lead to some interesting conversation for all of our listeners out there, I suppose.
So for those who really know what you're pretending to know about, it'll be sort of self-appreciation and amusing. Oh, he doesn't know what he's talking about, humor. And then there's the listener who isn't aware of the tech stuff and learns about the things you're asking by knowing that anything coming out of your mouth may be antithetical to practicality on any level.
Well, that was a lot. I mean, I don't really know how to reply to that.
There isn't anything to say, old man.
Who let you in, Simon?
I work here now, you old tool.
I'm not liking that every insult you throw at me tonight so far. Like, you've been on the air for what, 2 seconds now, and everything you've led at me has been old.
I call it like it is, old Poxy.
There it is again, man. I'm tired of this. All right. So, what do you have in store for us tonight, young Simon? On the cinematic dumpster fire, Rambo jump off a cliff? Or are you gonna tell us some ancient, death-defying Buster Keaton tale?
What's wrong with Buster Keaton? I mean, thanks to him, we have all the insurance we need on set today.
Was that sarcasm?
Poxy is a rather sarcastic character, Simon, but he takes Buster Keaton very seriously.
Yeah, you can tell I'm taking it super seriously, Ricky, as we all should. Anyway, Simon, really, what are you discussing tonight?
You'll have to stay tuned to find out.
Yay, I'm sure it'll be a blast.
Yeah, nothing you couldn't read about on Wikipedia.
Watch it, tough guy.
Anyway, when we return, Reagan and I will sit down with editor and producer Tom Costantino to discuss his latest work on Ted, along with plenty of banter on what it takes to edit and produce for major television and motion picture production.
And you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. Stay tuned because we'll be right back after these messages.
What message? We got one message.
Sponsor us!
Yeah. Call 1-800-PIZZA.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast. All right, wall crawlers, welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. Now, I would like to introduce my friend Tom Costantino. That's right, as the mastermind producer who has skillfully blended humor, heart, and a touch of the extraordinary, Tom has not only captivated audiences around the world, but also redefined what we expect, basically, from television comedy. Now, his vision and dedication have brought to life stories that resonate, entertain, and inspire. So, without further ado, I'd like to welcome Tom Costantino to The Ghost of Hollywood this evening. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I love your podcast.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thanks for making the time. We appreciate you coming here. We haven't had an editor on before, so now we get to talk about all the horrors of the workflow of editing. How intricate that
I sort of noticed that. I noticed it was departments, which is sort of fun.
Yeah, you wear a lot of hats. Now, can you tell us
Yeah.
a bit, let's start back at the beginning real quick. We'll get topical. So can you tell us a bit about how you got started in media, and of course, this has taken you on a trajectory through all sorts of different formats and projects in the entertainment industry, but how did it really begin for you?
Well, I mean, if I'm going in the way back machine, I used to do like tech crew in grammar school and high school, and I was building sets and sort of doing that kind of thing. And my dad got me I'm aging myself, but a VHS camera, and I started filming little things with my GI Joes or Star Wars toys, or my sister had like NASA special edition Cabbage Patch dolls, and I would make space movies with them. I'd build like a set of the shuttle interior and steal stuff from like the movie Moonraker, from the James Bond movie, or from Star Wars, and I'd start making stuff. And then in high school, my guidance counselor figured out maybe I should make a career of this, and then I went to Ithaca College, and then got my first job out of school at an advertising firm.
You said you went to Ithaca College in Ithaca, New York, upstate there?
I did.
Oh, nice. I
did.
I have I had a friend graduated from there probably 10 years ago in physical education. Nothing that correlates here, but that's my understanding of it.
Physical education is their other big major. It's actually great for that. I mean, they have a huge school for that.
Yeah.
So
he's moved down to Nashville and had a lot of success with that. Now, when it comes to so you go back with it, especially if you're throwing it on the VHS. And when does it get serious? Like at what point in college you start actually editing on computers, or were you when did you start cutting stuff?
I think it got serious right after. Oh no, maybe freshman year is when I tried this to be sort of like on air. I had this sort of like, and I don't think I've ever said this public. I had this dream to like go like the talk show route because I was obsessed with like David Letterman. And soon to be Conan O'Brien, but that's a little later. I was like an Ernie Kovacs guy, so I did that. And then my friend, who I was working with on we had a local station up there. It was like the college station. He sort of showed me the ropes of editing, and I'm a very hands-on guy. I mean, I did a little like VHS to VHS, but he sort of taught me, and then I sort of realized that I had an affinity for this, and then I started cutting my own stuff probably around sophomore year. So all my my documentary feature was cut tape to tape, and I sort of avoided the flatbeds, which is really funny considering I'm a film major. But that's really when it started, like sophomore year. And I did my own program, which was like a takeoff of not necessarily the news, and I cut that whole thing.
Oh man, we had Stuart Pankin on and Al Jean before, so we've talked not necessarily the news of.
Oh really?
Oh yeah,
he's amazing.
So you definitely kind of have an interest in like sketch comedy. So you're kind of going everywhere from like kind of like I bet you we could talk like you go back with Jack Benny and stuff. Like you watch the old stuff,
Yeah, Jack Benny. I mean, like I said, it's a little like I was more Ernie Kovacs. Jack Benny a little bit. I was like I was like one of the few people that was like under the age of 20 watching Carson.
Yeah,
and all his bits. I just forgot my train of thought about about sketch comedy. Yeah, I actually was part of the sketch comedy troupe for a short period of time freshman year. Actually, if you know your sketch comedy people, Andy Daly, I don't know if you know him, he's a comedian.
I'm not incredibly savvy in it, so I don't want to
he was my roommate, and we both there was a sketch troupe called the Nothing Special, and those were all film comedy specials, and I started getting into that. That sort of fed my my late night addiction for a while. But then I slowly moved behind the scenes.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, especially with Letterman, I was always more Letterman, and then I love Carson. I could watch Carson for days. I got like a 40, like, the the Rolling Stone interview he did from back in I guess it would have been the late 70s. I found an original copy of it and actually have it on the wall. So I'll send it to you.
Oh, that's
you
amazing.
need it more than I do now. But
yeah, I'd love to see it. I think he also did like a really good Playboy one too, right? Where he got into real detail about his working style.
Oh yeah, there's a few, like, of course, I mean, anytime I think of Playboy, I always think of the infamous John Wayne interview because it was so controversial, or Jimmy Carter. But yeah, I haven't read the Playboy interview if there is one that exists. So I can't speak to that, but
it might be the Rolling Stone one. I thought he did one in Playboy where he sort of dishes on his late night tenure.
Yeah. Now with so when you get into now you fast forward, right? So you're doing lead editing stuff now. I mean, you're supervising, you're putting teams together, you're having to kind of do a lot of I mean, I guess line producing might be a broad term here, but you're wearing a lot of hats and putting a lot of things in places. So how do you go about assembling a team for these larger projects that you're working on in today's world?
Well, luckily, a lot of this, when you're around for a while, you start to get to know other great editors, and you're always talking about working together. And you sort of can, editors can tell who are great other editors. It's like it's not necessarily the most flashiest of projects, but it's like, oh yeah, well that showrunner and that I know how that director shoots that material, and they put that on the air. Oh well, okay, you got some mad skills. But in the case of me, a lot of my people were, because I like to pay it forward, they were like assistants of mine. So in the case of the Orville, both Hillary and Bart and Kevin, who were my editors on Orville season 3, they were all at one point my assistant. And I met them through other various routes, and they're all accomplished editors in their own rights now. So that's the only thing. I lose good assistants. But, I also feel that, if you work internally, you can kind of, people get adapt to your style, and you're all of like mind. So that's usually, it is a lot of who you know in sense, and who you're comfortable with, and who's like, it's a chemistry thing too. It's not just like who's a good editor, but who's can sort of like be in the trenches with you.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You definitely have to have people that, where the synergy's right, and there's kind of an unspoken language to it. If not, then, I mean, how have you dealt with it, say over the years where you've kind of developed that sort of symbiosis with the crew? Now, when you were younger and you had to work on projects, was it difficult at any point where you came across this, like kind of learning how to put all this together? What were some of the kind of the building blocks that needed to be put in place for you to kind of intuitively begin to understand that was how you worked best within this frame?
You mean how I work best? You mean as a supervising editor?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, all editors will say this. It's like, I'd just rather just do it myself than trying to explain it. But then I found a bunch of people that also actually work the same way. It's like, oh God, I'd just rather do it myself. So that's kind of how, I've been fortunate. I've worked alongside some really great editors, some more famous than others, but all really talented. And, the hardest part is when you're either far away from production, or, production isn't like they don't have enough time to really gel the pre-production. And then, if you're damaged at the top, it feeds all the way to the back end and where the last stops. So that ends up being the real challenge. I mean, you can always find common ground with other editors to work with. And, sometimes some editors have bigger egos than others, but the predominant 90% of all editors are awesome, collaborative, fun people of like mind. And so, most of the time you can fall in and you end up all getting really close with people.
Well, when it comes to like making connections throughout the industry, one of your earliest creative works was as an editor for the TV movie The Trial of O.J. Simpson. Now, one, how did you find yourself attached to this project? And two, were you able to make any lasting relationships there that helped you get your foot in the door for future work?
Well, it's funny you say that. It was a project I was assigned to. I had been at the advertising agency, which was DMB&B, and I was looking to branch out, and I ended up my first stop was at a place called National Video. And for those who like film history, it's the studio where Tootsie was filmed. For all
Dustin
things, that was
Hoffman?
also an editorial.
Nice.
Yeah, Dustin Hoffman. So whenever he's like walking that was National Video. I don't even know if it's still there, but it was a big broadcast facility at the time. But they had this new department I think it was called the New Media Department, which was like Avid's. And I was working on another system called the iMix Turbo Cube. And this was an opportunity for me to learn what was slowly becoming the industry standard. So I got there, and within a few weeks, the OJ trial broke out, and they needed people to work on a show that was run by the BBC. It was the only way that London and England got OJ Simpson trial information. So we would take all the trial tapes with BBC producers, and we would basically make an hour weekly special from the entire week's worth of stuff. I mean, I was working like 70-hour work days.
Oh my God, yeah, that's crazy.
So that's sort of like it was more pressed into service than anything else, and it was the whole new media department. All of us were just like, okay, because they wanted to move forward and try it in an electronic medium, and the Avids were relatively new at that point. But there was a producer who I met, who I worked with for years out of that. Her name was Melissa Hess, and we worked on a bunch of stuff after we both left. But the main relationship that I got out of working on that show was the Avid. It was my first, that was my first love affair with that system. And it's funny because I wouldn't touched an Avid before 1995, and now I'm known as like the Avid guy, which is really sort of weird. But that was like my first foray into it. Trauma Fire.
Oh, we'll have to talk after this. Then you got to tell me the horrors of how I can package get a DCP together. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, sure.
No, I'm just kidding. So
pick
now,
a horror.
Now taking it all the way back. So what year we had this roughly?
We're around 95. During the trial of OJ. Yeah, I mean, I think I got out. I'm aging myself, but I got out in 93. I did the ad for him for like a year and a half, and then it was around 95. I think. So late 94, 95.
Now that you talk about the workload, I mean, of course, we'll talk probably much more intensely about working in Media Composer in a little bit. But with the workload, now when you're pushing 70 hours a week, how at the time how were you all ciphering through all the information to be able to kind of put something coherent together that quickly?
I was young,
ambitious.
I was excited. I was ambitious. We had like-minded troops. Luckily, the producers, were really seasoned news producers, so we knew what to do. But the reason it took so long is we were trying to do 2 weeks of work in 1 week. So it was just sort of like we were all became really invested in it, and kind of just knew that the only way out was through. But we were secretly wishing the trial would wrap after like 6 months or whatever, how long it was, because we're like, oh my God, another week of this, because we knew we had at least another week of like wrap out stories. But towards the end, we were like, Jesus Christ, can the defense just rest?
Yeah, you're calling people from the Watergate scandal that reported back then, asking them how to get through it.
No, it was definitely one of the harder things I did. But like I said, at the time, I didn't realize, but it allowed me to get up to speed on what ended up being the box that has taken me the last 30 years.
Nice.
So, switching gears to the early 2000s with MTV's True Life. Now, this was an iconic show that really defined the viewing habits of a generation. Gearing us up for more reality-based television with a style and tone more akin to a documentary. Now, what was your experience like working with MTV? And did the style of television storytelling lend to any work you did on future projects?
I love True Life. Like, I will always have a soft spot. I'll always have a soft spot for MTV. And it was kind of more like the Wild West back then. I was working out in New York, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Haven't talked to a lot of editors, but like, if someone wants to hire you for a Bravo show, it's like, you need these credits. It's like, well, you haven't worked on like the Cake Doctor show, so you can't work on this.
Similar to, not to interrupt you, but just to kind of put this in the box, is it similar to, say, like a directorial style? Like, you're familiar with this is what you should do.
Yeah. It became very closed off, but back at the time, it was like, we need talented people. I'm not saying I was talented, but you need talented people, and you got the job on a recommendation. Basically, it's like my friend Billy Murphy, who was like a big MTV guy. He would recommend me for something, and then like, oh, Billy, you just basically go in to make sure you don't screw up the job. It's like, oh, well, he's not crazy. Let's hire him. It was early on in the reality genre, so there was a lot of freedom. Like, things that have become tropes were actually being tried for the first time. And the amazing thing about MTV back then is that they had access to probably what would cost a show $500,000 or $800,000 in music rights. You would get like a 50 Cent song and it's instrumental, and get to use it 4 times in the show. I mean, a lot of these shows can't even air anymore because they don't have the music rights. But like the early days of True Life is, I just remember I did an act called I Have Baby Mama Drama. And like, I think I used Daft Punk, the Cake, and not John Mayer, Ben Folds 5, and like 2 other bands within the span of 8 minutes, and that would have been like $260,000 if you wanted to buy it right now. And you're using it like it's like score, and that influenced. You're doing like a lot of montage cutting to that, and a lot of like like a lot of narrative editing to that. So like I said, it was a really pleasant experience because it wasn't like corporate run, even though MTV was a corporation.
Well, yeah, it sounds cool though, because like especially as someone, if if you're an editor, you're usually pretty visual and you can kind of get in your head at points and think things out, and a lot of that correlates. Like say to me, even with screenwriting or however you develop an idea, usually it kind of can develop around music, and so having this sort of database at the time that would have been relatively endless given what MTV would have had on set really allows you to be pretty liberal with that. You're able to, it sounds like you can go any direction you want. If a song hits your head and you're like, this kind of flows here. I don't know, but it's pretty unique because I didn't really ever think about it that way. You take a lot of that music for like a grain of salt and then that is just there, and then of course you would consider in larger productions, say if Frank Sinatra came about, that would be really expensive. But it's kind of interesting to think that some of these shows aren't actually able to air anymore because the licensing isn't there, and then the liberty that you had at the time to do that. So
right, and there was one, maybe two people giving notes. You'd have like, it was MTV News and Docs, a guy named Marshall Eisen, and then Dave Cerolnik on top of it, if you know your MTV history. And then on the other side, there was like Nina Diaz and stuff. But basically, it was like Marshall and Dave. That was it. And maybe Dave wouldn't even look at it. So you got your notes from Marshall. It was me and a story producer. I wasn't called story producer at the time. They were called producers. And you basically the budgets weren't high, but basically she shot most of the stuff herself. Lucy Angstrom, I worked with a bunch of times. And then I did most of the cutting, and that was it. We had a PA and we didn't even have an AE. I think I did my own tape loading. And that was it. And you worked on the job for 8-10 weeks, and it was enough time to you work hard, but not so hard. Like you had time to hone in the stuff. It was like a dream job. Yeah,
it definitely sounds like an easy workful, like not very bureaucratic, not a lot of red tape and over communication. No. You just kind of streamline it. Once you get and go, you're moving.
No, and slowly over time, then these practices formed, which are now seem like almost passe. But also at the time too, it was like my resume of jobs I turned down and wish I didn't turn down because I was I just stayed at MTV. I have a really impressive resume of jobs I didn't have that I'd probably be doing better if I actually took the other job because people just recommended. We were a small group in New York, and you jump from a True Life show to Queer Eye, and then back to I don't know. I'm trying to think what was at the time Kathy Griffin or something. So you just start building up this resume super fast.
Yeah, especially, the versatility, because, I know we're going to talk about different mediums in a little bit, but you definitely you're not lying when you say you have covered the board. So now when it comes to now technology and editing, and we've talked about Avid a little bit now. Okay. So I'm newer to this now. If you would put me in a 5-year period with Avid, that makes me a baby in your world. So now let's think. I'm interested in how has it evolved? Not Avid per se, but how has editing evolved, and what have been some of the most impactful transition in technology that you've witnessed throughout the years that have kind of changed your workflow?
Well, I would say probably Script Sync has been one of the most incredible things that came along, which, if you know what that is, it's basically you put the script or your interviews into a database, and then you'll put all these click marks, and you can basically word search and find anything you needed. So if I was building a Frankenbite when I worked on intervention, building high profile, but highly intellectual psychology bites, and you have to get somebody who's not normally saying this stuff to say it. Yeah, being able to find an ing or a word you had to find the drunk, but the right tonality of drunk. Having to be able to do that over 400 hours of tape is remarkable. Same thing with improv and takes. So I'd say that I'm not going to AI is not as I'm not sure it's as scary as it could be yet. I think it will be, but there are some things that actually Adobe Podcaster, cleaning up audio. I wish I had that miracle drug 20 years ago when, I had to, someone's being interviewed or we're getting some B-roll on let's say something like True Life, and they're way off mic and they're saying something amazing. You can barely hear them. Now we can, totally put it through, download it, and it'll sound like they're on mic.
Oh yeah, you can clean it up. I mean, it's funny. I was talking to our mastering engineer the other day about so there's an interview Steven Spielberg was doing with Tom Snyder back in the late '70s, right after Another Encounter. Or look, I can't get the damn name of the movie out right, but anyway, an encounter of a third.
You mean Close Encounters?
Yeah, Close Encounters
Wait.
of a Third. Yeah, but he's sitting there talking about Close Encounters, and he's talking about the transition to Dolby Stereo at the time, and how that really was going to like balance out, the dialogue versus the overall, in play.
Right.
So it's, with
now you can't hear anything. Now everybody now it's all just like backgrounds and mumbling.
I guess. I mean, you just sidechain everything to death there.
No. Yeah, it's just for some reason there's very few people in the practice of mixing dialogue strong, and then like that's why everybody's watching movies and TV with subtitles on, because the quality of the dialogue track has dropped exponentially in the last 10 years.
Why is that? Yeah, I'm naive here, so explain that to me.
I think it's a stylistic thing. I didn't mean to take you off of what you were saying, so don't forget. But it's the advent of surround sound and people not having their systems set up right, and always trying to make bigger and better, and people, the art of enunciation, like people used to do in the movies when you used to talk like this, and everything was like crisp consonants and stuff. All these confluence of events have made it basically made mumblecore out of stuff. Like you watch. I don't want to pick on a show, but I actually. Some directors and some producers I feel like Succession was really good at keeping the dialogue crisp, even though like everybody's sort of like tossing off improv and stuff. But there's some shows where you literally can't understand what they're saying because they're just sort of talking like this in the middle, and then there's like rumbling going on in the background. But that's like you can look up articles. That's like a known problem in the industry.
Oh yeah, I mean, I know Christopher Nolan particularly has been criticized heavily in the. I mean, I know Oppenheimer actually just won Sound Awards, but speaking to that, but prior, I know he's been criticized for kind of this overflow of background sound and making things difficult to hear. But now, do you think that there's now about, say, incorporating ADR or something like that into it when you're dealing with dialogue or Foley art and balancing that out? Do you think that going from working, say, LCR 5.1 to 7.1 and now getting to Dolby Atmos makes cutting this, you really need, like you're saying, the monitor system has to be positioned right. You're really looking at leveling everything across the board so that once you actually package it all and it's in the theater, that it can fit each medium sensibly and still work out the way that you need it to.
Well, you have to go back and check everything in 6 different ways, 5 different times. You have to, play them on the big speakers and the little speakers, and someone's, needs to give you a file so you can go home and kind of listen to it in your iPhone. It's just like, and then somewhere, and then inevitably, at least on the projects I work on, you're going to get a call or someone's going to make a call going like, God, the dialogue, I mixed it too low. Can we fix that? It's like, it's a little hit or miss. And by the way, the sound team on both the Orville and Ted or like, they're amazing. They're fantastic guys, but everyone's got, now I'm not saying them, but like, tastes differ, and, it's all well and good if you are listening to it in this gorgeous $1 million sound studio, but then if somebody's listening to it on their iPad with a pair of headphones, it's like, what does that quality sound like in the stereo track? And so it used to be like, what you get in is what you get out. And that disappeared probably 10 years ago.
Well, we touched on this a moment earlier, but, focusing more directly on generative AI, how do you see this technology shaping the future of editing?
Well, I hope it shapes it in a way that it becomes a tool like anything else that we can use. That Sora AI stuff's a little scary.
Yeah.
But I don't think, and I hope I'm not wrong, I think it's going to be a while before AI knows how to handle a showrunner that shows up late. I'm not saying this is Seth or anything. I'm making up a scenario. Like it's the Hollywood it's a lot of Hollywood is very personality and very like, minutia turn driven.
It's human.
And I feel like AI is very unwieldy in terms of, artists are getting better and better at doing stuff, but I haven't seen anything that's like, like you can't snap your finger and suddenly, the next blockbuster is going to come out of that. So I think for a while it's going to be tools in which, unfortunately, some jobs will get eliminated, but will help speed up production and some of the lower level stuff. And then, maybe 15 years from now, it'll be the Terminator and we'll all be out of jobs. That's my honest opinion.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, like this is dumb, but there's like a little, there's a little app where you can put pictures in, and it'll animate like this. You should take forever in After Effects. Like if you want to have photo slides, and I'm talking about like classy ones. They've had like dumpy ones. I'll give it a little plug. It's called Moshow. I don't have anything in it, but like it's great. But it's also not, it's very limited. And, when you put a title in, like you're stuck with whatever the AI wants to do. And like you have to do like 9 different versions to get something that's acceptable. And while it's fine for like a kid's student project or like an industrial, like you're not going to be able to get away with that in a Marvel movie. So we got some time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like there's like a superficiality to its usability. Like you were saying, like, you can get pictures out of it, but if you want to apply words or say with faces, like I've used it in, in other areas that it seems relatively useful. But say here, like you were talking about plugins earlier, I feel like there's once that's worked out and then being able to deal with the read and the write and all of the actual, the how much it takes to process some of this material will really get there. Yeah. But you're right. Like say with Sora, like say where you can do the text to visual, even though it's not been like publicly released yet. Like I know Tyler Perry was talking about pulling like a $400 million production zone on it. I mean, when I used even like something like in video and it's now trying to take like a narrative and it'll take still shots and you can see where it's primitive, but you also can see where it's trending,
No, it's going. It's just right now, I think you need competent adults who are trained to do that. And I don't think it's going to necessarily replace everybody just yet. But I like these things happen over time. It's like if you look over a 10 or 15 year lifespan, it's going to be radically different. But if you look 6 months or like when the unions are trying to IATSE, my union, and SAG SAG and the writers were trying to negotiate something that wasn't like they're negotiating a theory because the technology isn't quite there yet. So that's where I think we're at right now.
One of your longest stints in your career was editing for 15 episodes of Scarred. Now, in terms of editing, how do you think you captured and contributed to the show's unique style and tone?
See, that's funny. I think I was there for a season or almost a whole season, but I don't think I did 15 episodes. I think that's IMDb doing its crazy thing where I got tagged onto a whole bunch of episodes. I worked on some. It was actually ironically a summer filler job between True Life.
Nice.
But stylistically, that was another show. Speaking of Wild West, where like you could do anything you wanted, and talk about having the freedom. The crazier you were with the videos and the flashbacks and the rewinding and stretching, 9 seconds of a guy hitting his head on a railing off a skateboard into a 7-minute piece. Like you had to get pretty creative. The little tricks of the trade that I've used for like some of my flasher editing, that was sort of born out of there. But like I said, I started in advertising, so I learned a lot of those tricks early on and brought that to MTV. And then, having all that unscripted skills, then brought it into scripted, which made it much easier for me to do my job.
Now, let's revisit back to editing across, various media here while we're talking about television again. Now, so how do you adapt your editing techniques when transitioning between, say, something like television and film, and then of course now streaming, which kind of floats the boat in both of those arenas?
Well, the crazy thing is that they're sort of starting to meld. TV used to be you had an 8-day, 7-day schedule. You cut a drama, you basically got 2 or 3 days for an editor's cut. It was sort of like a factory. And now I find with streaming, it ends up being, depending on the job, it can be much more like a feature. You're working on it for weeks or months on end. You have lots of things open. The workflow isn't necessarily so linear. You might be working with a director or producer one day, and then the next day you're getting in second unit, or you're even on set dealing with second unit. It's very much more of an open, slower, thereby more expensive workflow. So yeah, there to me, I mean, I guess there's still like the half hour comedy. Some of them, the pace is still pretty quick, but to me, because of the high level of production in both features and streaming television, they're sort of blending in terms of their workflow.
Shifting gears to your recent work, you're the lead editor and co-producer for The Orville. Now,
Yep.
working under these two titles, what are your key responsibilities on the show? And has it been difficult to balance those responsibilities? Once again, the time is your currency. So it's everything that I've ever been trained for and I love. But, when season 3 of The Orville was huge. And we also did it through COVID. So to get this stuff right and also work at what is effectively, I'm not saying, a lot of streaming is now at feature level, but it's not a totally feature schedule. So you're jamming a lot into a day, to some degree. So it's hard to manage your time, because sometimes you have to be in two places at once, or if there's 3 fires, like which one is burning the hardest? It's like you have to sort of like make these decisions. But the lead editing is still the lead editing part. I have people who assemble their cuts and they do a great job, and then I either give some notes or I take over some scenes. And then in terms of the producing, for me, it's mostly in post. Sometimes I was dealing with a lot of social media, but it's like, helping out with second unit stuff, or if there's like, emergency triage for like, and needing to do like ADR or other things like that. It's a lot of stuff on the back end, attending mixes, making sure the workflow is right from VFX all the way back to, what would be online. That's basically that part of that job.
Now, so there's I got like 80. I could talk to you for 3 hours in response to that. I won't lie, but so the reality of it too. I mean, like you're saying with the production of this say The Orville's a pretty big show with VFX and having to incorporate a lot of that. Now we'll probably ask more questions here in a minute, so I don't want to jump all over the place. But sure. When you've done with that budget over the course of a season, what some of these larger sci-fi movies, I won't list any by name, but we could kind of pick from the litter here, have done with one movie. Now, how do you do that and still maintain the strength of the production, where the quality really is there? And how did the transition to Hulu, which from my reading, correct me if I'm wrong, seemed to expand the budget to some degree, how did that transition affect the production both positively and negatively? And then was the financial end of that able to kind of allocate more for the special effects?
Yeah, the thing is what it allowed is that, and of course the industry literally changed under our feet as we were producing it, because effectively I was probably one of the earliest ones on, and I might have been the last person off of season 3. I think I closed up my Avid on the last day. So that was like 37 months for me, which is unheard of on a television show. Now, granted, in fairness, it would have been more like 2 years if the world didn't decide to end for a while. Yeah, and we were working through 2/3 of it, which was really crazy. But Hulu allowed a lot of things. Hulu allowed freedom of like time, and I don't mean like time like to work forever, but like we didn't have to stick to 42 or 43-minute episodes. We could let things breathe and be more expansive. And if something needed a moment, or there could be a really fleshed out A and B story, and Seth and his writers are they're all huge sci-fi fans. They're all like really smart, so they took advantage of that format. But unfortunately, that ended up building basically 10 features and mini features. Like they were ranging from 62 to like 80 something. I think one was like 86 minutes. It's like, which is an actual feature, but
your workload went up quite a bit. Then is what. The
workload went up quite a bit, and that's part of the reason we ended up pushing the last 6 months, because we wanted to get the special effects right. And there was just so much to do, and Seth works like a feature. Like he's very singular focused. He doesn't like to he's a good multitasker, but he doesn't like to multitask in terms of the art. So when he's working on the sound mix, he's not like just like tossing off the color to somebody else. He wants to be part of that whole process. So and the show's better for it. But yeah, no, it's a challenge, and that's why we work some long hours. Like we definitely had a lot to play with, but it was ambitious, and we met it. And I am happier, and also probably going to die young.
All right, and it's time for a quick break here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard with Miss Reagan, and we are talking with Tom Costantino about his career as an editor and producer and his recent work on the Orville and Ted and all kinds of other crazy things. So stay tuned. We're going to pass things off to Simon really quick here for a quick little segment of the cinematic dumpster fire, and then we'll be back to talk more with Tom about all the stuff he's got going on. So yeah, that's right. That's it. That's all I've got. Anyway, Lenny, go ahead, hit them buttons, man, so I can take a quick break. That's right. You are listening to The Ghost of Hollywood.
When it comes to making movies, anything can go wrong. And tonight we're here to discuss that on the Cinematic Dumpster Fire.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire, right here on The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm your host, Simon, with another unusual story about a time when things went awry on set. And tonight, we revisit 1996 during the making of the movie Titanic, which became world-renowned for its record-shattering award intake, and among lesser highlights, its clam chowder. Why clam chowder, you may ask? Well, if you know, then go ahead and call the writer scene to whine about such a topical exploit. But if you don't know, well, the story's a trip. Literally. First, let's rewind back to 1996 on the set of Titanic, or shall I say a set of the Titanic, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. According to Bill Paxton during an interview with Larry King shortly before his passing, he mentions that James Cameron had been on location working on the expedition to take some footage of the actual Titanic, which was to be used in the movie. Now, I'll stick with the Paxton narrative for a moment before I jump to conclusions and build the legend around the truth, which is always important with a tale such as this one. So, as it goes, Paxton claims he wasn't a huge fan of the catering, but since the crew were shooting on split shifts overnight, he took a quick lunch at the food truck with James Cameron where they enjoyed some of the clam chowder being served that evening. Then, according to Paxton, they part ways, and shortly after he goes back to his trailer, EMTs arrive on site asking who had eaten the clam chowder. Now, according to Cameron, who gave some insight during a recent interview with Tom Power, someone dumped a bunch of PCP in the chowder, leveling off anybody who ate it with one hell of a buzz, so to speak.
So then what happened?
Oh, look who it is.
I heard Bill Paxton and PCP, so I came a-running.
Came a-running?
Sorry, little Appalachian bleed there. Anyway, continue with your story.
Now, I know geography well, so let me give you an idea of the scenario.
All right.
The crew is on Dartmouth side of Halifax, and the hospital is tiny.
Oh, is it tiny, yeah?
Yes, it is very tiny. Basically, the hospital gets flooded with around, and I'll give you the numerical spread using both ballpark counts by Paxton and Cameron, around 85 to 150 crew members from the production, each experiencing their own hangover place, if you will.
Butt naked, baby. Wait, did you say 250 crew members, or?
I said 150.
Oh, all right, I get it. Go ahead, anyway.
Side note, if you're curious what poxy means, well, maybe you don't know much about the history of PCP. Anyway, they used to call PCP butt naked in Hanover Place where the drug proliferated at the time because people apparently got butt naked after using it. End footnote. Now, where was I?
Oh, hospital full of tripping Titanic production crew, I think.
Oh yeah, well, at first things were pretty serious because everyone thought they would be lethally poisoned by shellfish used in the chowder. But once the spiking came to light and a few of the crew broke out into the conga, it became pretty clear everybody was, well, stoned.
Tripping with Bill and Jimmy, baby.
Shut up, Poxy.
All right, I'm sorry.
Anyway, as it is essential to our mission statement at the Ghost of Hollywood, growing Bill Paxton's legend is critical to the future of mankind.
Will you finish a damn story, Simon?
Hang on, I'm almost there. So, Bill says he's waiting around the ER, and after a bit, he puts it together that he's frying. So, he tells James Cameron he's going to head out and walk back to the set and wait out the trip while he's drinking a case of beer.
Oh, I'll be goddamn shit kicker heaven.
Paxton for the win, baby.
That's right. Anyway,
as far as I know, they never really found out who did it. But there are some theories, and none of them matter enough to really even consider. Fortunately, as far as I'm aware, no one was hurt, and the catering company was fired, which was also part of one of those theories I said I wouldn't mention.
But you did. So now you have to tell us.
Not much to tell, but the idea is that the chowder was spiked to make the catering company look bad and get them fired. Quick turn at getting even sort of thing, but never verified. And that will wrap up another segment of the Cinematic Dumpster Fire. I'm your host, Simon, and you're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. Stay tuned because Poxy and Reagan will be back with Tom Costantino to continue their conversation right after these messages.
Interested in television or movies?
Then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for the best in cinema-related podcast at theghostofhollywood.com or wherever you get your podcast.
With the rise of multiple streaming services and the
Are you interested in movies? How about cinematography or screenwriting?
If so, then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for interviews with past, present, and future filmmakers from fan-favorite movies and TV shows right here on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast.
And while you're at it, don't forget to visit our website and sign up for our monthly newsletter for all the latest updates and episodes at theghostofhollywood.com.
It's weird to think about like having to crunch 30 minutes and then put it into context where it's still good, but maybe more in detail to like I don't know, what are the differences? I mean, are there different expectations, different codecs? I mean, if you're assigned to a project with one streaming service versus another
technical one? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But
No,
technical. Fine. There's always like, and that's I actually worked with a great post producer named Dave, and John Weissman over at Fuzzy Door, and they kind of dealt with, like, I didn't have to like deal with the minutia of the specific online, the technicals, but like the difference between Peacock and Hulu, like, there's a lot of minutia in that can drive you crazy in terms of like, metadata here and act breaks there. And like, we didn't know exactly what our act breaks were going to be till literally on TED, like took us 14 months to literally lock that down. And, Hulu's got its own set of challenges, but as a creative force, they're kind of similar, like they're very artist friendly and they're very, very supportive of the material. And they're always trying to help you make a better show, even if they have a difference of opinion, they always try and defer to the creatives to try and make the best product. So that process is always the same. But when you get into like, who's what delivery format and who's on the, some people still want DVDs and who's on the distribution list, you need a whole team for that just to not go insane. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. I could imagine.
Yeah.
So like now let's talk about TED for a minute. So as far as we know, you've recently wrapped up your work on the TED miniseries. Now, is that correct? Yeah. Or is there's still some work that?
Oh no, the show's wrapped up. In terms of it being a miniseries, we'll see.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Yeah, that's under disclosure now. Right? So we'll see. Go TBD. Now. It takes place as a prequel to the original movies, right? But the miniseries also shares like various actors. Most of the core actors at least make an appearance in the Orville, and then of course some of them are regulars. Now, because now this might kind of lend into special effects, which you want to talk about a little bit, because both have a unique position of special effects. But what is the transition like for you working from something like the Orville, where you have a lot of special effects and almost an entire world, to something like TED, where the world's relatively normal, but you have to posit a talking teddy bear?
It's funny. You would think it's different, but in some ways it's not. The TED is there were 3,000 shots of the bear, save nothing of like changing fall to winter and like a talking truck and all sorts of stuff. So it's actually it's just more of a stealthy VFX heavy show. But in terms of the workflow, because we had so many, crossovers from the Orville in front of behind the camera, a lot of it was sort of similar, bless Seth, he's very loyal and he likes, he works at a certain caliber and level, and we all like to strive to that. But like I said, he's very loyal to people who work well with him and do good for him. So our mix team was the same. I was the same. A lot of the production crew was the same. The ADs, you can go on. The production designer Stephen Lineweaver. So a lot of people had that familiarity. So it was like old home week when we showed up to TED on, like day 2 of shooting. Yeah, so strangely enough, it isn't that different. And a lot of the a lot of the mega showrunners, because I did some work in Ryan Murphy too. Like, they use the same people, so they understand the well-oiled machine. So, the material is a little different. Like, I'm dealing with a lot more empty plates, and obviously how we had to hone in the bear. Well, that was a small portion of the Orville. This was like 80% of the work. That's the difference, but overall, it feels very, very familiar.
Are you able to? I'm totally side chaining here for a second. But are you able to say with like ADR? How does it work with like an animated figure like Ted, as opposed to dealing with reality? Do you feel like is it a little more liberal creativity, or are you still having to match mouths pretty tight?
No. And on the contrary, it's fortunately the scripts were pretty tight, but there was plenty of room for improv, of course, until the strikes happened. But we got most of that done. No, because also Seth is, this isn't for every anime show, because Seth is the showrunner, the lead actor, and the director. He's there on set, and we were getting his lines in camera, and we used some of them, but not all of them would be perfect. One, because he can't be on the physical set. So sometimes it was in the corner, and that created like a buckety sound. Yeah. So, those were used as a guide, or like, the guy is like a mega genius, but even he has limitations. Like, if he's like, there's an actor or a day player not doing exactly what they should be doing, like he's only given 80% to Ted, and so he may want to like in post, like punch up that line either from a performance line or change the line a little bit. So we definitely got back in the booth after and upgraded some of the lines or changed the reading or performance, a good portion of them. So we were sort of editing the show a couple of times around, but that's ADR is like you can't do Ted without ADR. I wouldn't know how the hell to do it.
I'd imagine, but it seems like it could be a pretty expeditious workflow, given that, like, if Seth's able to provide the scratch track on set, then when you get him in the booth, he's kind of able to work on his inflection and just pop around what's already in place, and then you can pop.
Yeah, some of it, but they're writers. They punch up jokes sometimes. Like they'll take a suggestion from me, and we'll pump up something if we need to like get around a story thing. So it's or even just something that something happened with one of the actors, and we want to like have Ted respond to it. So there's plenty to play with. It's like you have an open architecture. You don't want to go too far, because like eventually you're gonna melt the VFX team, and Blair and his team are absolutely fantastic. Blair was on the movies with Seth, but you can't just sometimes you can reinvent the wheel on certain shots, but you don't want to like totally throw out the script. Nor did you need to, because it was all on the page.
That makes sense.
So, Ted is aired on the streaming platform Peacock, and being that the original movie had a fairly adult sense of humor, and that the miniseries is the third installment of the franchise, I think it's pretty safe to say that the atmosphere and the humor of the show have been fairly established by this point. Now, speaking to this, has Peacock had to step in at any point to tone down the show or offer up a different direction than what was initially envisioned?
They saying y'all too raunchy?
Yeah, basically.
Actually, ironically, they were the opposite. They, and I wasn't because I was still working on the Orville, so I wasn't really there for the writing process of this. But from what Seth has told me and what I learned the minute I got there is that they knew what they were buying, so they weren't fazed on any of the cursing or the raunch or any of that. As a matter of fact, I think there were a couple jokes that we thought had gone too far or fell flat, and we offered to take them out. And they were totally accepting, but no, they didn't have any real problems. The stuff that was a struggle for everybody is that when you get these first cuts, it's just an empty plate, and there's not even like Foley in them, because that screws up the animators and stuff. So it's basically just like you're just tilting down a flight of stairs, and everyone at the network or everyone people would be like, well, that's going on forever. What the hell is this? But if you stick to your guns and you keep working it, that empty staircase ends up being Ted flying down the stairs in a really wacky kind of funny way. So that became the bigger challenge is letting a bunch of empty plates, actors talking to what are literally tennis balls at some point, breathe, so that you can actually make the show what it is in the back end.
a lot of feedback between you all, like you say, like maybe even if it's not directly with you and Seth, or is there a lot of feedback on finalizing that? Because you're building things by layers. So, say if you're just positing the audio and then you're positing the Foley and then you're getting a bear in there, you're kind of seeing it transcend. What's the difficulty of explaining? Is there any skepticism or second guessing that goes on between people that aren't as understandable that are looking at it, that the team kind of has to be cohesive and say, this is what we're working towards, and eventually once it's there, you'll understand it?
Well, there's always there's always pressure because people were thinking they were getting a 22-minute shows like comedy, and they expanded to 30, 40 minutes, so they got a lot of more bang for their buck. So the first thing is like I said, humans are very good at imagining things, but at a certain limitation when there's 300 shots and it's just literally Seth's voice and nothing. There's only so much people, including ourselves, where we're just like, do we eat that? It's like, should we shave it? And then sometimes we'd find out that we shaved something too tight and have to like roll out the plate more and reanimate or explore. We realize that there's something good going on here, and so we would like adjust it so that we could do something else with the animation. So it was a very open workflow. But yeah, it's to say people were skeptics is like, no, they weren't like, it wasn't like they were like, no, this is no good. They were sort of like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to be like cynical. And it's kind of, so say like, if I could put this like from like hands-on experience, like, I've done like, I'll give you an example. I recently working on some Foley art, and my mother comes into the studio and she's like, why is there a shoe sitting there? Well, in the scene, there's someone tying their shoe. So, I try to get it kind of close, but so I'll kind of walk her through it, or making footsteps or anything. And I kind of show her what's going on. And then the understandability of it comes into play on like, that's how it works, and then they never unhear it in the TV show or movie ever again. Well,
when people are writing the checks, they still go, I don't know, because it's their money, and you're like, okay, But that's you're right. That's basically what it is.
Yeah, I mean, the level of pressure of like getting someone to understand it versus the completed project, it really makes a, like say if you're just watching a scene like you're saying where there's just a plate, or if you just posit the dialogue and you have to completely build an audio scene from scratch, right? So if you just posit the dialogue and you're watching with the ADR, and then you're kind of seeing where sounds are, and then sometimes things show up organically or things might not need to be there that are, to make people understand really like on the daily of how that intricacy comes to play is I feel like, is a bit of a hurdle, because it's so much of it is just taken for granted.
It's a lot of guessing until it isn't. It's basically how it goes. It's like, I don't know. We're trying, and then, finally, okay, we got it. We can move on to the next fire. No. That's basically how you build an animated character.
It sounds incredibly tedious. No, it
is. But if it comes out good, you're happy.
Over the years, is it easier to, and I promise, Reagan, everybody, I'll quit deviating after this, but it's is it, what kind of, like, say like on set, you get someone new and there's kind of this symbiosis in the team, dealing with these external pressures and being able to kind of either hold face or stay structured and not take it personal. Say if you're given some hard criticism, or if there's like a cross to bear where something needs to be created, where between the ego clashes and being mature enough to actually work on the pressures of production, do you find it essential within yourself? Like, was there a big learning curve where at some point you're like, all right, I got to wipe my tears and start being able to handle this? Or have you seen it in other people where you're like, they may really struggle to make this work out? How much of a factor is that on the ground?
Well, there's always something in every production where if you're working at a high level and you guys are like a well-oiled team, and then somebody comes in thinking that they're going to just reinvent the wheel, and you just go, make it. Yeah, just not going to make it. It's just like, you just sort of go, oh, that's cute. Okay, we'll see how that goes. And then either they learn and then they join the workflow, or they keep going at them like, yeah, that's not gonna end well.
So it plays out pretty organically.
Yeah, it plays out very organically. And most people, we're having to work with some, everyone's really professional, and everybody, they've been around the block, and everybody has their own style of working, and there's, but everybody comes in really good at their jobs, and part of working in Hollywood and on these projects is adapting to styles, adapting to having to triage problems, and most people really rise to the challenge, and that's always fun to see too. And then you build like long lasting friendships out of it. and long-lasting relationships too. You know, I've been with Seth for 7 years. I feel very blessed.
Now, to go formatting and color grading, I'll just keep it not getting too wordy here. So they play a pretty crucial role in the final product of all this. Can you explain your approach to these elements in these high stakes projects? And on the daily, do you still deal with this sort of thing a lot, where you're overseeing kind of the color grading processes or seeing how things are formatted together?
Yeah, on smaller projects, I more take the lead on that. And something as large as this, you know, there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen because they're so VFX driven. I usually I'll have my opinions about stuff, or like blending it from an editor's artistic eye. But most of the time, it's like you're there to sort of support the colorist and the showrunner or director, and sometimes the DP if they're still in the process, and the VFX team to get it on the air. Like, I don't need to spend 8 hours taking 3 points out of a black in the corner of something. But if something looks like it's not blending seamlessly, or an overarching idea for like a stylistic thing for a scene, like that stuff I'll get involved in. But unlike on an indie feature on a smaller project where there's a smaller team, I'll run a color session. But in a case of a show like this, you just want to be part of the cog. Or a cog in the wheel.
That makes sense. Now, with visual effects, say, particularly with the Orville, because we've talked about the plates and Ted, but with the Orville, you're dealing more with some screening. You've got a lot of, ships, things that are akin to we'll just go right out there and say something like the visuals of Star Trek. How do you work with the visual effects team? Are they putting this stuff together on their own, and then they're supplying you with these shots, and there's some kind of communication to what you need to build the story from them? How does?
Oh no, there's tons of communication, and that evolved too as our scenes got more and more complicated. We started adapting, which I guess is the way to say the Marvel Star Wars way of working, where you're basically cutting it all in previs. And, basically building an animatic together along with the visual effects team. They'd supply shots that were scripted and then come back. And if some of them didn't work, I'd give notes and come up with my ideas, and it'd be like this organic process. Then, of course, Seth would come in later and have some ideas that he would add on to ours, and the scene would slowly build over time. And even occasionally, towards the back end, and you'd have some changes. But that's it's a very open-ended, organic process. The same way we sort of did the Bears, that the Bears first pass animation is something you use to springboard off of. And then both the VFX team and the editorial showrunning team would then add to elevate the material. But that's kind of how that is. It's never here's your footage, go make it work. It's like very, very like one giant circle that runs in both directions.
It makes sense.
So when it comes to action sequences, this can require a special touch in editing. Now, how do you keep the pace thrilling without losing the audience?
Action sequences are tricky, and sometimes on a TV budget, I've run into this challenge before, where it's like it takes a lot to make a good action sequence. They're very highly specifically shot. Like the John Wick stuff, they planned forever. And they're meticulously paced, and even in like a TV show, like, I don't know, 911, which I worked on, like the best action sequences is where they had time to shoot it, or there were actual things happening. And because what I've learned is that sometimes people think that they're shooting an action sequence by a bunch of people just running after each other, and then it ends up being like 1.5 minutes of just people just running. There's no tension. There's no story. There's just nothing. And what action sequences are is a sequence of challenges inside the actual bigger sequence that people have to get through, and that's what builds tension. So either through editing or through pickups, I do a lot of pickups on action sequences, or if I'm lucky enough to get in on the previs part of it, talking that out then, so that there's a ratchet up of tension. There's always a challenge, even if it's somebody like trying to get through a doorway and someone throws a stack of boxes in front of him. Like, it's something as stupid as that is better than just people just running after each other. But action sequences need, if you can't have planning, then you need to at least be able to adapt on the fly to build tension.
Do you feel like say, if the cinematography team provides you with something where you can break the line and kind of jar the audience? Do you utilize things or
sure.
sequences?
You
like
do
that?
anything you need to do, basically. I mean, but there's only so many editing tricks. Like you have a lot of editing tricks to sort of ratchet up tension. You can pull frames. You can, jump the line. You can sort of, play with stuff. There's a cut in like Dead Reckoning where I think it's Dead Reckoning where I think Tom Cruise puts his fist through the glass, and there's like it's like a blend of two takes, and the cuts on the glass break. And it is especially jarring because everybody, the person in the car's head snaps back really fast. It works great, but that's the kind of stuff that wasn't. No one said we're going to do that, but the editor, I think, was like, this is a way to ratchet up the tension or to solve like, oh, I love the reaction in take two, but I love the way Tom hit his elbow in take one. So all that stuff you can do, but you can only take that so far. You need a little help from production.
I mean, that makes sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's basically it.
Yeah, I mean, like say with with Scarred, where you were talking earlier about stretching time, where you like almost superimpose people, where you're saying like you have this sort of, where it sounds like something with jarring with Tom Cruise in that particular scene with the glass would deal with, like kind of the timing and pacing where you're kind of shortening and expanding them in micro sessions. But like you're saying, it's almost organic or unspoken. So when you deal with that, is there like if you're working alongside with another someone else mixing or with a team, is it more of like a well articulated sort of this is what we should do, or is it like guys the tune goes like ba 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 like that? How does it translate in communication?
Well, the thing is that, I've been fortunate to work with people who can just they'll see what you're doing and then they'll just naturally elevate it. You don't even have to tell them. Sometimes you have to give them what your intention was and they'll sort of follow your lead. But I've been fortunate enough to work with people that can just sort of see what you're thinking just by looking at the cut or just by looking at your, what you've written down as what you want for a shot. And they usually are able to sort of execute it and then bring it up a notch. So that's been very lucky. Like they said, the trick is when, you can't there's no room to improve it through either, visual effects or sound, or you don't have enough time or you can't do a pickup day. That's when action scenes run into trouble if they aren't meticulously planned out beforehand.
No, that makes sense. So
then you just cut them as short as possible.
So, all right, I was about to say, how do you deal with bad material? That's the answer.
You just cut them down. You just cut them down. Oh, I guess, they just go through the door. You just make the challenge as minimal as possible.
Your crew comes in, they're excited about it. You're like, look, y'all blew this shit, and we're just going to have to do it the best we can.
All right, there's always somebody, I'm not naming names, there's always somebody who wants a giant 19-second crane shot that they think is cool, but it completely takes all the tension out. And while I appreciate their effort, but it's like, sorry, what are we going to do? We're going to have everybody's fighting for their life, and then suddenly this camera's going to sweep in. So what are the two characters doing while this camera comes from the other room to sweep in under them to see them fighting? It's it doesn't make any sense. So that's the shit that ends up on the floor.
Nice. Now, so you've talked about timing being everything in editing. Right now, where is this proved most essential, or when is it really paid off in a particular project with timing?
You mean editorial timing?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a broad sense, yeah, really when it comes into editorial timing. Like what project have you worked on, probably most recently, if we could stay recent, where you've seen, like you're talking about, where this sort of timing transition in an action sequence is really critical. Where is this paid off when you're getting the timing down?
I mean, not to give you a dumb answer, but every single one. There hasn't been I think a lot of shows live and die by their pacing. Yeah. So there's a few that are more flexible than others, but a lot of comedy timing and a lot of the action stuff on the Orville is down to the frame. I mean, the stuff where you can have a little more leeway is like dramatic sequences or when you can let something breathe in the action, then you're choosing between character actions or small twitches in their eye, or what helps you, like you're watching a scene, it's like there's emotion building up. How long do you let that silence play in a dramatic scene before you're not ratcheting up tension or ratcheting up emotion? You're actually letting the air out of the scene. Like that's where you have a little more flexibility. But on Ted, things were down to the frame, the field, if we could help it.
Yeah. Now when you are dealing with storytelling through comedy, right? Say I know I read some reviews where the Orville was criticized a bit more in season 1 as to where by season 2 and season 3 it had really blossomed. Now you also see some, at least I did, this is just my grain of salt, I kind of saw more of a transition from the sort of episodic satire where it became less contemporary in episodes and began to transition more into a narrative. Say with Isaac's presence in, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't seen it, but as Isaac kind of goes through the motions with his relationship, and then different things, say with Toga, how do you balance as an editor the storytelling through comedy and then where you're able to kind of advance the plot simultaneously to that? And where were the learning curves with the Orville that were able to kind of accentuate this and make it, I guess, where you all were able to get a little bit more of an understandable reception from season 2 and season 3 as to where season 1 wasn't so much?
Well, I think it was always part of the plan to sort of slowly move away from like the slapstick comedy of it all. And the benefit of season 1 is that it progressed, that we had all the scripts, and the same thing with season 2. We had most of the scripts at the start. So we were able to sort of lay groundwork in earlier episodes that would pay off in later episodes. But the challenge was slowly, like, it's like you're turning a battleship. So slowly, modifying the tone as you go and making actor choices or character choice or pacing choices as you go, because you don't want to be too far from what you did before, but you're trying to push the audience along a little bit. So those were always the moments where you're like, well, that read would have worked in season 1 or in this episode, but here it's like we're going to play it straight, or we're going to take our time with it. So that was always a challenge. And then by the time you got to season 3, we kind of knew what we wanted to be, and then it was really easy to switch because I cut comedy and drama sort of the same way. You go for character and emotion, and then hopefully the comedy comes out of the organic nature of it all.
So just really the genuity of it is how it plays out.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, earlier when we touched on like action sequences and things of that nature, when you made the example of how somebody might want a crane shot, but it wouldn't exactly fit the pacing. Now, I'm curious, when you have to reach an agreement on the final product, I'm guessing this can sometimes be pretty challenging. So how do you navigate differences of opinion to find a compromise?
I think it's always best to know your place.
Yeah.
All right.
I think it's in the end it's commerce, not art, and I'm sure I just pissed off 1,000 people by saying that, but like
Well,
there's certain things that I'll die on my sword for, because I know it's going to like wreck something. But like if I can make that crane shot work and it's not going to ruin everything, I'll figure out a way to get the crane shot. And some people just like it is a subjective medium. So what may not work for somebody else may work for others. Like I have issues with some big action movies, where I feel like I'm not going to name names, but like they're beautifully stunning looking, but the pacing is, for my taste, is like, oh, Jesus Christ, there's no tension in this death scene or any of that stuff. I mean, but as still frames or as a mood piece, they're fantastic. But to other people, they think they're the greatest action or sci-fi whatever movies you've ever seen in your lifetime. So it's all a matter of taste. But in the end, there's a hierarchy, and sometimes you have to be on faith that people are making a good decision creatively, and sometimes it'll come out and then they go, yeah, you're right, that crane shot was stupid. and then you're like, all right, well, but didn't bring down their whole movie, or TV show. So you just move on to the next.
It's like letting a friend wear a bad outfit you've advised against, it hurts for a day, but you'll live.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like I said, it's not show, not to take from Chris Rock. It's not show friends, it's show business. So, As long as you understand that, you'll do just fine.
That's true. That's what I was saying earlier about whether you kind of have to be encased in the understanding, maybe have a little bit of a thick skin, because if not, you get cut and not, find yourself on a production you never wanted to be there outside of your mind in the first place. So as an editor, and we'll ask you just 2 more questions before we let you go. We appreciate your time today. Now, but as an editor,
absolutely.
What are your expectations? I know now, because we've talked about knowing your place. What are your expectations in terms of storytelling? And your role obviously influences the narrative, but to what degree? Like, say if you're working with Seth, is he like, your thing, make this work, kind of gives you some feedback? How does that play out?
I mean, he's incredibly collaborative, and but he also, and I mean this as a compliment, he knows what he wants. Like he's 6 moves ahead. On a good day I can get 4 moves ahead, so he's always at least 2 moves ahead on me.
Right.
I mean, so you got to sort of like trust, especially in the case of like Ted or something, or even the case of the Orville. Like no one's a bigger Star Trek fan, not just Star Trek, but sci-fi, deep well. And I don't mean just like TV shows, like books, Ray Bradbury, like, horror fan than Seth. Like he knows his genres well. So he has a big library in his brain to draw on. But in terms of like, but he also has a lot of faith in his people, like a lot of faith in me, like a lot of like things that like he knows that I'm really good at, like an action sequence. He just like he and the visual effects, he's like, you go show it to me. And like he'll make a couple of like minute, tweaks in performance, and a couple of like he has a couple of thoughts, but like a lot of those things they're very close to what the editor cut are, and that brings me a lot of joy. But there's other parts where I can get my 2 cents in. I mean, there's some other like I worked on a feature called Hot Summer Nights where I sort of came in and did had to sort of like come in and help get some of the filmmaking. The filmmaking was great, but the edit was not totally there, and I had to get that back on track, and I had a lot of freedom in which to shape the narrative. And director Elijah Bynum, he's a good guy, and he likes to take input from people and likes to like work the material until it's something better. So it changes from job to job. I hope I answered that right.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's your opinion. I don't know if there's a right way to answer it, but I get.
No, I hope I made sense there.
No, yeah, it was definitely clear.
But okay. So, like discussing Seth MacFarlane, when working with him on the Orville versus Ted. Now, I figured these must have been pretty different experiences. So, can you contrast your role in both projects?
Yeah, I strangely enough, like I knew more about the Orville because I'm a big sci-fi buff. So I was sort of more comfortable in that genre. Like the stuff I've been doing since I was 10, like watching old episodes of, Buck Rogers.
You like sending Cabbage Patch to Kids to the Moon. And
shit. Exactly. Like you're getting a Domino's pizza and like watching that at, Pix in New York on a Sunday. So it almost didn't feel like work to me in some ways, which is interesting because it's still a lot of work. But like Ted actually is a little more of a job, like I've done comedy before and stuff, but like it's not something that's like, I in my core a talking teddy bear. So that was sort of the bigger challenge. But the process of working with Seth and stuff, a lot of it was the same. I think there was I think people were hoping to find more efficiencies in terms of the working process, but to get it to the level that, because it really was a TV show and not a film, but we ended up working on a sort of a feature process. And I think in the end it served the show better and was probably a bigger hit because of it.
All right. Well, Tom, we appreciate you making the time to speak with us tonight, whatever time it is out there in the world, and
whenever you drop this.
Yeah, it's true. I know it's never in real time, So I know. I mean, do you say before we let you go, as far as your ambitions throughout your career, I know that in previous interviews you've talked about when you were younger, maybe wanting to do directorial work or this or that. But do you think that by being kind of having such an expansive mindset and workflow on projects that are this large or versatile, we'll say, because they can be range in size, but with working with projects that have this level of versatility, do you feel like that's what ultimately made you an editor?
Yes, I think that, and the ability that I couldn't do stuff without I had to be hands-on. It was like I used to do stuff with X-Acto blades and cut out, I used to do cartoons, and that was like with my hands and with pencils and with razors, building Legos, like everything was with hands-on for me. And so the machine is basically an extension of my art. I've gotten better at telling other people what to do. It's you have to do that, but yeah, basically it's because I get to physically connect with the material.
All right, Tom Costantino, everybody. You're listening to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and we will be back to say goodbye after these messages.
Are you interested in movies? How about cinematography or screenwriting?
If so, then check out The Ghost of Hollywood for interviews with past, present, and future filmmakers from fan favorite movies and TV shows right here on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast.
And while you're at it, don't forget to visit our website and sign up for our monthly newsletter for all the latest updates and episodes at theghostofhollywood.com.
Welcome back to The Ghost of Hollywood. I'm Poxy Leonard here with Miss Reagan, and we've just finished speaking with editor and producer Tom Costantino about his career and more recently, his work on the TED television series and the Orville television series. That's right.
We'd like to thank Tom for taking the time out of his very busy schedule to join us on the show. We'd also like to thank our crew here at The Ghost of Hollywood for all their hard work on each episode that comes to fruition.
Ooh, you made it sound like, maybe like, I don't know, I'm thinking about fruit trees, but it also sounds like we don't finish episodes and stuff. The way you worded that,
Working with you sometimes feels like I may only finish some episodes.
Oh, you're so sweet, Reagan.
Don't make me bring Simon back in here.
No. Don't
You
do
heard
that.
her, Poxy.
Her what? You're like half my size.
For now, old man.
It's Linux I'm scared to fight.
Don't bring me into this, numbskull.
Ooh, you two are doing a great job. I mean, don't you think they're doing a great job, Reagan?
God, as if one of you isn't enough.
We're taking over. Look out.
Anyway, thanks most of all to you, the listener, for joining us tonight for another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. We'll be back in a few weeks with another new episode as we continue to make our way into the depths of Season 4.
And it's nothing short of cinematic madness, baby. Madness.
And that's all for tonight, everyone. From all of us here at The Ghost of Hollywood, good morning and good night.
You've been listening to another episode of The Ghost of Hollywood. The Ghost of Hollywood is directed by Zach Flannery and written by Chris Kalon. The show is mixed by Linux Flannery and mastered by Grady Sizemore and Microphonic Meltdown. For more information on The Ghost of Hollywood, please visit theghostofhollywood.com.